climate solutions. Recordings in progress. We are a local group dedicated to enacting transformative climate solutions. That means we're looking for big things that change the underlying systems that have caused this problem and that will endure. So we are focused on 100% clean renewable energy for our city. We're focused on the creation and build out of a climate-friendly future Santa Monica, which we hope to achieve through policies and on-the-ground projects. And we support people in Santa Monica and around us who want to take action and need and want support and community in doing so. So we start our SAMOCAN webinars with a little update on recent activities and projects. For that, I am going to introduce you to our newest team member, our program lead, Makeda Bullock-Floyd. Makeda graduated from Samohi and later Pomona College with a degree in environmental analysis. Makeda is motivated to inspire people to reconnect with nature and to develop a love of the natural environment. The focus of her work with CASM is leading our youth programs, so she'll be involved in so much more. Makeda is not giving the primary presentation today, but I did think it was good for her to, for you all to meet her and for her to share a few brief highlights from the very busy summer that we've had working with our youth. So let me turn the floor over to Makeda. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much, Laureen. I'm going to share my screen. I have just one slide, and it is full of pictures from this year's Climate Corps. So here you can enjoy this collage that I made. It does have a lot of things, but hopefully you can, it's kind of fun. You can look closely and see different things going on. We had a lot going on. So this year's Climate Corps for the summer program, we had 12 participants and we've had 31 events and more to come. And that included 8 farmers market shifts over 4 days of tabling at farmers markets, engaging with the community. And we had 4 days of tabling at school registration. And that was for grades 9 through 12 at Samohi and 7 and 8 at Lincoln Middle School to encourage sustainable commutes to school. We visited City Hall. We had presentations from city officials and visits to local sustainable businesses. We've had advocacy action workshops and spoken to restaurants about the city's foodware ordinance. We've been to the beach dunes restorations, learned about clean power and transportation, and marched in the 4th of July parade. And we volunteered with our hands in the ground at local Tongva sacred site, Kuruvunga Springs. We've come together with creativity, humor, and artistic expression. And through all of these, we've had hundreds of climate conversations with the public and among ourselves, keeping the climate discussion going and understanding the challenges and opportunities that are present with all of this. The Climate Corps are currently working on completing their advocacy action, an advocacy action of their choice in the city. And that is all I have for now for my overview, and I look forward to sharing more with you all.
Thank you so much, Makeda. We will certainly look forward to another presentation from you down the road, maybe in a couple months. So now we'll move on to our major presentations. We have a great program lined up for today with Mario Melgarejo and Mia Levenson, who both came to us through the Californians for All Youth Workforce Development Grant as Climate Outreach Fellows with Climate Action Santa Monica. After Mario's presentation, we'll do questions. We'll have questions for 5 minutes, and then we'll move on to Mia's presentation with a few questions for Mia, and then we'll open it up for either and both of them and whatever discussion you all would like. Nancy Sanchez, who has also one of our community engagement fellows through that state program, has been one of the leaders of these SAMOCAN presentations. And Nancy, I'd love for you to please introduce Mario.
Well, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for showing up. Now let's begin. Okay, Mario joined CASM in the early 2023 as a member of CASM's Climate Job Corps. Since then, he has worked on a variety of outreach projects in electrification and transportation, been present in various community events, and assisted in running of the summer youth program. He graduated from UC Davis in 2020 with a degree in sustainability environmental design and participated in a study abroad program on housing and urbanization in Barcelona in 2019. Inspired by his educational and personal experience, Mario now seeks to indicate his professional career to addressing social and environmental problems in California, particularly in the area of transportation and urban design. Mario, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Nancy. I'm just going to share my screen now and pull up the presentation. Let's see. All right. Well, hello, everyone. I'll be talking today about our engagement with Samohi and other schools to promote more climate-friendly ways to get to school. And so first, I want to step back for a second and consider the big picture issues at play here. Vehicle transportation is the greatest contributor to Santa Monica's carbon emissions, accounting for 69% of emissions in 2022, based on the city's greenhouse gas inventory. These daily school trips are part of a broader pattern of vehicle reliance in our city. In 2023, we conducted a survey that showed that 62% of students arrived by private vehicle. That's more than half of the student body coming in cars each day. So CASM recognizes that one of the biggest ways to support the city in achieving its climate goals is helping to get cars off the road. And that includes getting cars off the road en route to Samohi in the morning and the afternoon. By encouraging more students to walk, bike, carpool, and take public transit. And so taking a step forward now, maybe on more tangible issues, and the reason CASM felt the need to engage to solve these problems is we noticed there's a lack of guidance that specifically targets Samohi students on riding the Big Blue Bus or using the city's bike network. There's also a lack of awareness about alternative drop-off areas to Michigan and 7th Street. We saw that there's limited engagement and communication about school commutes throughout the year, besides maybe the biannual Bike It, Walk It, Bus It Day. And so that leaves many people defaulting to driving. We also saw a lack of data on how students and families are getting to school or what factors are driving their decisions. So without this information, it's hard to know where to focus efforts or how to best support behavior change. And so all these challenges opened the door for us to take action. And they also provided us with an opportunity to get the attention of major stakeholders, like the Big Blue Bus, the City of Santa Monica, Samohi administration, and the school district. We also identified the beginning of the school year as a critical time to do some outreach. It's a time when families are rethinking routines, and it's a great moment to change behaviors. And so in the past 2 years, with the approval of Principal Murray Cruz, we were allowed to table at Samohi's Get Your Stuff Days. These events provided a great opportunity to connect with students and parents directly. And at these events, we conducted a survey about how students plan to get to school. Using a phone board, we tallied these responses with stickers, and we had a very eye-catching display that helped attract more people. We also shared key commute information, including information about safe bike routes, bus routes, and schedules, as well as tips and advice for carpooling. We gathered valuable feedback from students and parents about their experiences, concerns, and suggestions for improvements, which gave us a chance to understand the challenges that they're facing. And also, in last year, August of 2023, we had 2 Climate Corps summer members take the stage during the 9th grade orientation assembly to speak to incoming freshmen about transportation and encouraging them to think about how they can make more sustainable commute choices from day one. And so here's a snapshot of the results of our data gathering in the first year. We spoke to hundreds of students, and we received a total of 501 responses to the question, how will you get to school on the first day? And here are the results. As we can see, the majority of students are still relying on private vehicles, either driving themselves or their parents driving them alone or being dropped off with multiple students, so carpooling. And so while carpooling is helping to reduce some of the car traffic, I mean, there's still a large opportunity to encourage alternative methods. We also collected written comments where people shared their concerns about the challenges they face when it comes to commuting to school. And these were some of the most commonly reported issues. The theme here revolves around safety, convenience, and reliability. So people are concerned about the bike lanes around campus not being safe enough. Bus schedules being infrequent and inconvenient. Lots of comments from parents and students about safety. Congestion at Michigan and 7th. And there was limited awareness about alternatives to this. People were caught by surprise when we told them that they could drop off their kids at 7th and Olympic. And so during this year's tabling, we made some changes. Last year's data was very valuable for knowing how kids are getting to school. We weren't anticipating a big change this year, so rather than collecting data that was likely to be similar to last year's, we used this year's survey to encourage the behaviors we'd like to see. So we set up the count as more of a pledge, and we asked people if they would commit to using one or more modes of transportation besides driving or being driven alone. And here are the results. Even though we changed the question, I feel like we can draw similar ideas from this to last year. It shows that students are willing to explore alternatives, but ultimately the car-based option was still the most common and preferred option. Again, we collected written comments about the general commuting experience. We heard very familiar concerns, and that's not really much of a surprise. There was no change to the bike network surrounding the school. There hasn't been many changes to the bus service, although there was some changes to Route 7, but this is before they've had an opportunity to try that. And so, on top of, we shared, I said earlier that we shared some commuting resources on safe bike routes, helping students identify the safest bike routes to campus, information and advice for using the bus, and carpool and drop off. So we realize that ongoing education is a critical component of this effort. So we want to make this information accessible and make sure that students and parents have the information that makes them aware of their options. So we've identified one way of making this more accessible. We found some channels online. Peach Jar, we've distributed these various modules through Peach Jar, which is that platform that distributes flyers to parents of SMM USD students. We also want to distribute it to other newsletters that reach parents, including the school-specific newsletter or the PTSA newsletter. Between 2023 and 2024, we loosely convened a task force to join us in engaging on this initiative. One of the first things we did was organize an informal bike walkout audit to look at the conditions on the streets that surround and connect to Samohi. And these are some of the observations we found. One positive aspect was that the traffic calming elements on Michigan Avenue, like the curb extensions and the roundabouts, which were installed about a decade ago, do help slow down cars, but it does not reduce the number of cars. So it is still very congested, and there's a lot of competition among cars, bikes, and pedestrians, making for a very hectic environment and not very efficient. We saw that drop-off points outside of Michigan Avenue are underutilized for various reasons, maybe convenience, definitely lack of awareness, which is what we saw when we were tabling and gathering information. We heard a lot of people weren't aware that the alternatives even existed. And so these other drop-off points are not being used to their full potential. Another thing we had the task force, we joined the task force to engage in was the Big Blue Bus comprehensive operational analysis. So the Big Blue Bus was looking to make big long-term changes to their service, and that included a months-long outreach and surveying the community. And so we pushed for our task force and various community members to respond to the surveys and attend workshops and advocate for more frequent service to the high school and times that align better with the bus schedule. And the result of that was Big Blue Bus created its new 5-year plan, which is approved by City Council and will be rolled out in the next couple of years. There will be improvements to pretty much all the routes that serve Samohi. One change that's already been made as of August of last month, Route 7 was modified to align better with student bus schedules. And it's impossible to know if we had it's impossible pretty much to measure how much of an impact we had on this by pushing people to reply to these surveys and push the Big Blue Bus to make changes, but we're happy to see these changes nonetheless. And also something we did for the first time this year was table at Lincoln Middle School. And this was a key moment for us because middle school is sort of the perfect time to start thinking about transportation habits and alternatives to driving. Students at this age are already commuting to school, but they're not yet at the point where driving is their default option. And so we wanted them to start thinking critically about transportation choices. And so here are some basic takeaways that we can take away from the outreach we've done so far. First one is pretty dang obvious, but most people drive, parents and students. Students and their families are just scattered across the city, and often driving seems like the most convenient option. And we know that safety is also a concern with limited safe bike lanes and safety concerns around public transport. Sometimes unclear bus schedules, and with all this, driving just to some people feels like the safest, most reliable way to get to school. However, we do know still that a lot of parents and students want alternatives. We've heard from them that they'd like to see safer bike lanes and more bike lanes that are actually safe to use. Because to some, it just doesn't feel like a realistic option due to that. On top of that, buses don't always line up with school start times or come frequently enough. Remains to be seen if the Big Blue Bus 5-year plan, the changes that are included in the 5-year plan, when they get implemented, if that will help improve this. And we understand that some people always choose to drive, and that's something we acknowledge, and that's perfectly fine. But if we had more frequent buses that match school schedules and safer bike routes, I think more families would have the choice not to use their cars, and it would help a lot of people feel more confident in using alternatives like biking, walking, or taking public transport, and that will help remove some of the cars off the road. And here are some things that I think we and our task force can take as next steps. Staying aware of policy and funding opportunities. There are always new grants, programs, and policies emerging that can help secure funding and resources to continue making progress. So when there's an opportunity to support these at City Council, I think we need to be aware of it. We need to continue reaching out to people in the community to gather more feedback and ensure everyone's voices are heard. Students are very passionate about sustainability and the environment. We've had several climate corps, including most of them were Samohi students, assist this year in our tabling. And I think we need to harness that energy, partner with student groups like Team Marine to allow us to tap into this enthusiasm. I think engaging with other schools in Santa Monica, like we've started with Lincoln Middle School, and hopefully we'll do with John Adams, will help us build a citywide movement for tackling car reliance for school travel. And finally, and this one's super complicated, I know, but there's still a stigma around, for many, there's still a stigma around biking, taking the bus, or carpooling. And I think this can be changed. I think we can change the narrative by highlighting the benefits, like reducing our carbon footprint, saving money, and even improving mental and physical health, as well as increasing awareness about measures being taken to address safety concerns. Like recently, the Metro E-Line tap to exit, or recently a law was passed that would allow Big Blue Bus drivers to kick out people and ban them from using the bus if they're a repeated nuisance. So that concludes my presentation. Try and get to the next slide. Yeah.
Mario, thank you. Brilliant work. We are so proud of the way you have taken CASM's mobility outreach and elevated it to a whole new level. Thank you very much. We do have some questions. Richard has posed one in the chat. You can put your questions in the chat. We also have a small enough group that I think I can see everybody, and you can raise your hand if you have a question. So Richard had a question. Do we know what better bus service means specifically in terms of routes and schedule that it would take to induce more students to ride?
Yeah, I think better bus service means more frequent buses and more reliable buses and buses whose schedules align with the school bell schedule. Because students have complained that sometimes they only have one opportunity to take a bus and get to school on time. The next one comes in 30 minutes, or the next one gets there 2 minutes before the bell. And safety for some of them. I really don't know if some of the students who well, maybe there's like half of the students who cite safety that I feel like they would take it if safety concerns were addressed. And there's like the other half who, when I asked them, when was the last time you took the bus? They said, I've never taken the bus. So I think it's perception, but safety is safety and reliability and frequency.
Mario, could I, this is Richard, and I don't know how to raise my hand on this thing. So, and because I don't have video going, you can't see my hand is actually up. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But what I was really trying to get at is whether you've learned enough from your surveys and your interactions with the students to know whether, one more bus on a particular route at a specific time would capture 10 more students, or because then you can kind of translate that into the resources that it takes, and you can have a conversation with the Big Blue Bus guys or other folks that maybe have an interest that could translate into financial support. More, I get that conceptually, but if you're asking Big Blue Bus to reallocate resources, then they're going to want to know, I assume, what route do you want? How many buses do you want on it? What size buses? How many riders do we get? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and if the answer is you don't know, that's fair.
Yeah.
Instantly, because I thought it was a very good presentation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, yeah, the truth is we don't know. That's a sort of granular information I think only Big Blue Bus has. I don't think that they don't share that publicly, how many and also from last year and this year, there wasn't a significant, or there were no changes actually to the amount of buses that were traveling to Samohi. So we weren't able to measure. I think we measured both years under the same condition. If this year the changes had already all been implemented and they all had a chance to ride, and we saw that more students chose the bus, then I think we would see that. That would, answer our question about whether one more bus would help more students ride the bus.
Thank you. Good answers, Mario. We have Jennifer Smith has her hand up.
Hi, thank you so much. I also just wanted to make a suggestion because I've had a student who rode the bus to Samohi, and one of the struggles that we had was that he had a transportation app on his phone, so he could know when the bus was coming and he could run out and get it. And it was often wrong, and it often told him that a bus was coming and that the bus never came. So I was wondering if there could be some improvements to the communication in those kinds of times. And there were also, and Samohi has a different Wednesday schedule that they didn't adapt to. That was hard as well.
Yeah.
But it was a wonderful presentation, and I did meet you briefly at Samohi at registration, so it was nice to see you. And thank you for all of this, and thank you for all the work you do. The only other thing I would say is that I was inspired to find alternatives for driving to school, and you couldn't get me to get anywhere near Samohi because I hated it. But I started in elementary school. I started walking, we started walking buses to school with kids. And I know through the Safe Route to School, through the city program that was eliminated, that we're hoping to get back. And then there are people doing bike buses to school. But I think kids also, there's safety in numbers, right? So when kids walk to school together, bike to school together, and take the bus together, which is one of the things that we had, like a group of at least like 5 kids who rode the bus all together. So that could help in safety. That's my comments. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. Janet, and then after Janet, we'll move on to Mia's presentation, and then we can still ask Mario more questions. So, Janet. Unmute yourself, please, Janet.
There you go. Hi. So anyway, yeah, that was a great presentation. I agree with Jennifer, and also I really am glad you go to middle school and that you're planning to go to other middle schools, because I do think that that's more like if they get started, then they won't be as afraid or whatever, deterred from taking the bus. When I've gone by or when I've worked with the high school students, sometimes I notice that there's a huge crowd at the bus station. So it seems like if they documented how many students were riding it at that certain time, they would find out that there's so many more people filling the buses at that time than probably most other times of the day. And that would warrant like another bus. Because I think if people think it's going to be too crowded or they don't want to wait with all that many students, that could be a deterrent as well. So anyway, but Big Blue Bus is a huge operation to try to change. But so I think the great thing that you're doing is going to middle schools and making it like fun, or maybe they could have some kind of challenge if the teachers would make it some kind of a, I don't know, something to do with their classroom. If it could be taught in their classroom, and then how many of you went on the bus today or something, I think that would be great. But anyway, great presentation, and I'm glad you're reaching out to middle school.
Thank you so much, Janet, for that observation. Mia, we are now introducing Mia. Nancy, floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Mia Levenson attended Samohi and is a recent graduate of the University of California, Santa Cruz, with a BS in environmental science and a minor in sustainability studies. She has interned at Natural Bridges State Beach, where she has worked with youth on environmental education and restoration projects. She has also studied abroad in Costa Rica, examining the relationships between the people and the natural ecosystem. Now she is studying to become a LEED certified green associate. Mia joined Climate Action Santa Monica in April as a climate outreach fellow. During her time, she has worked on green building research, electrification projects, and community engagement events. Today, she'll be presenting her research on mass timber, a potential climate solution for Santa Monica. Mia, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Nancy. I will get my screen shared now. All right, here we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Mia, and tonight I'm going to be giving a briefing on mass timber. I'll skip through most of this intro since Nancy hit on it, but I just want to quickly start by giving a shout out to Peter Rockmore, who is a sustainability analyst at the city, who has helped me and guided me and supported me throughout the research that I've been doing on mass timber for the past few months. So tonight's objective is basically just going to be educate the public on mass timber buildings. Here are a few examples of mass timber buildings around the world, just to get a picture in your head of what a building can look like. On the left, we have a building from China, and on the right, we have a mass timber building from the UK. So I want to start us off by just asking the question, what is mass timber? Mass timber is a large, solid engineered wood product that can be used as an alternative to steel and concrete, which is traditional building materials. There are three main types of mass timber, which include cross-laminated timber, glue laminated timber, and nail laminated timber, which are all used for different aspects of the building, including the floors, the walls, the beams, you name it. Here's a line of mass timber production. It first starts off at the forest site, where the main types of timber that are used are Douglas fir, pine, and spruce. Then it is transported to the manufacturing facility, where it is compiled into these large engineered sheets, which is then transported to the construction site, where they are put together on site. Why do we want to look at mass timber as a solution? Number one, there's a large emissions reductions when it comes to the building sector. We know that there are 37% of global greenhouse gas emissions that come from building and construction. And with the use of mass timber, we could get that a reduction by up to 43% of emissions compared to traditional building. With Santa Monica, they have a green building policy, and they want to ensure that all new construction operates as low emissions. There was a recent ordinance just passed for low carbon concrete. So if we use low carbon concrete and mass timber to create a building, that would ensure very low emissions. There's also a need to meet the Santa Monica's housing needs. And with mass timber, we could do that in a more sustainable way. The 2021 building code allows for mass timber construction of up to 18 stories, meaning that we could build both single family and multifamily homes and office buildings. It is also referenced in the Santa Monica housing element as a sustainable building technology. There are also aesthetic benefits and building safety, which I will get into a little further on in the presentation. And there's a design for deconstruction, which means that there's the ability to disassemble and reuse the materials at the end of the building cycle, or if there's a change for building purpose. And that can go all the way down to the amount of screws that were put in on the construction site. The environmental impact of mass timber has a 43% reduction of carbon buildings, and this means that there's lower embodied carbon during both the product and the construction stage, despite having the transportation of materials from the Pacific Northwest and British Columbia, since mass timber is not locally produced. Here we have two charts which show the embodied carbon of a mass timber building versus a concrete building. And these two compare an 8-story and a 12-story building. I want to point out some things on these charts for you guys. If you look at the blue portion of the chart, this is A1 through A3, which is the production stage of the life cycle of the building. And that includes the extraction of material, the transportation to the manufacturing site, and the manufacturing of the material. So you can see that there's a large chunk of those embodied carbons comes from that phase. I want to also point out the red small bar. You can see it is slightly higher in the mass timber section of the chart compared to the concrete, and that is because mass timber is not local to the area. So we are having to transport these materials from the Pacific Northwest or British Columbia, which in overall still comes out to a lower embodied carbon when we compare that to concrete, which we can get locally. Here's a local case study of a mass timber building that was built in Chinatown, Los Angeles. This was on a hybrid build. So that means that they used concrete, mass timber, and steel to build this building. You can see that per unit, this looks at the A1 through A4, so the production and the transportation of materials. There is a much higher embodied carbon of concrete compared to mass timber at roughly like only 25 kilograms of CO2 per meter squared. So much, much smaller amount. So if you use a hybrid build, you can still implement mass timber and get a similar result at maybe a lower cost due to that transportation of material, but you're getting a lower embodied carbon of the building. When we look at cost, this is something that is a little bit tricky because it really depends on the building and the type of building and how you are using the materials. Since we don't have this material locally, there can be cost increases due to the transportation that it needs to take. However, since mass timber is more lightweight, there is a smaller workforce, and since it is pre-engineered, you can get a reduction of up to 50% when it comes to the building costs and labor costs on site. Building safety is also something very important to consider. When it comes to fires, mass timber has a unique self-charring property, which means that the outer layer of the wood will char and create a protective barrier that insulates the interior of the wood and will slow the spread of a fire. If you look at the picture on the right, this is a fire resistance exposure of 1,000 degrees Celsius for 120 minutes. And you can see that there is that self-charring on the outside and the inside integrity of the wood has held up. With earthquakes, there is an ability to reduce the seismic force that is put onto the building due to its lighter weight and its higher strength and ability to distribute its force throughout the building. There are also aesthetic benefits of mass timber. Since it has this natural wood material, there's a unique approach which adds structures to their natural environment. This biophilic design allows communities to feel more connected to their natural surroundings and can have a positive effect on their mental health, have stress reduction, and increase productivity. So this is a way for us to have Santa Monica to be that place of living and working in a more stress-free environment. This here shows us that there are mass timber buildings being built across California today. As of June 2024, there were 126 mass timber buildings in construction or were finished building, and 169 buildings that were in design. Here are a few example buildings of hybrid buildings in Los Angeles. On the left, you have a building near Sawtelle, which was built by UCLA for student housing. And on the right is that building in Chinatown I talked about earlier. And I do also want to mention that there are two buildings in Santa Monica, one on Main Street and one that is currently being built near Memorial Park on Euclid. A few obstacles that are important to mention are we want to ensure that all of our timber is Forest Stewardship Council certified, meaning that there is sustainable sourcing and management onto these forest sites. We want to make sure that biodiversity and ecosystem health is upheld, and there is the elimination of clear cutting, as that can be very detrimental to the environment. There are also a few transportation issues, which I mentioned earlier, that can lead to unexpected cost increases as these materials are not sourced locally, and we'll need to be transporting them and getting them from up north. Also, having contractors that know how to use and work with mass timber to be able to source it, and get the lowest emissions possible is something that needs to be worked on. If the city of Santa Monica were to have an ordinance or incentivize mass timber as a building strategy, we would have to have educational workshops to make sure that these contractors know how to deal with mass timber in the best ways. So policies that are currently in place are the new California Building Code, which was adopted in 2021, which allows for up to 18-story buildings. And if we are to continue with local municipal policy, this can further develop the mass timber market and make it more accessible. I also want to note that I presented this to the Commission of Sustainability, Environmental Justice, and the Environment on Monday. So this is something that is within the city's knowledge, and they are working to see if there's more research needed and what can be done through an incentive or ordinance for mass timber. Thank you so much. And are there any questions? And if you think of any questions later, you can feel free to email me here.
Thank you so much, Mia, for this great work. We were approached by the city of Santa Monica that had received a request from a council member to investigate this question of mass timber. And I'm very proud to say that Climate Action Santa Monica was able to add some real value to the city's work by through its youth program and having such a stellar young person as Mia, who was able to take on the task. So thank you again, Mia. Does anyone have, I see a hand up from Kent. Kent, please.
Unmuting, and Janet too. First, an observation. There was a proposal for a building, I believe it's on Nebraska, and our friend, name escapes me, who works with a lot of developers, Melissa Sweeney, showed us renderings of it, and it was a mass timber proposal, I believe. It had a lot of structural lumber in it in any event, and I'd be interested to know the status of that. But my question has to do with the transportation and the sourcing locations that you mentioned, Mia, that kind of affects the cost and the timing and reliability of the material. Do we see that developing to more local sources over time? Because there is timber harvesting in California. It doesn't all come from the, way up near the Canadian border, I don't think. Is there any idea that that's going to become easier to find locally and maybe address some of that problem?
Yeah, so as of right now, there, as I said, currently aren't any. However, we talked to a project engineer who worked on that building in Chinatown, that hybrid build, and we were asking her some of these questions. And she said that from her knowledge and experience in the field, that if the market were to continue to grow, if there were cities that were incentivizing it or having an ordinance, that is something that would be more likely to occur. But she said there is nothing in the works as of now that she was aware of or that I'm aware of that is making it come to this area specifically. Yeah.
Thank you.
Here we go. I'm on mute. Oh, okay, Richard Landers has his hand up, and then afterwards, John Zinner, please.
So this is a breakthrough for me. I learned how to put my hand up and unmute simultaneously. It's a big deal. Mia, I thought it was a really, really interesting presentation, and I not know anything about the engineering of the materials or the physics of the materials. Just the look, frankly. So it's such a relief from the usual sort of steel and stucco boxes that we seem to be surrounded about these days. And I was particularly intrigued by the notion that it doesn't have to be just an A-frame in the woods, that you can actually go multi-story here, and that offers an alternative to the traditional building styles and technologies that we use in Southern California in general, Santa Monica in particular. My question is really the challenge. My personal experience, and I'm not a developer, I'm not in this business, so but I've had my toes stepped on a few times. That the industry, the building industry is, and by industry I mean pretty broadly, not just the materials producers or even like down to the carpenters, but every place all along is very traditional. I think I told Laureen this. This is a tangent, but I bought an EV almost 10 years ago. It took me 5 years to get the city of Santa Monica to approve my meter. And the reason, and there was no objection. I live in a condo. There was no objection to it within the condo. Southern California Edison was ready to do it, but building and safety simply didn't want to take the time to do something new and different. And I worry, and I'm now involved at my HOA in a construction project on behalf of the association, where again the city is a real obstacle, and the source of the obstruction is just a preference to do the tried and true easy thing. And I'm curious to know, in your interactions with the city, as well as developers that you've spoken with about this, what kind of how they this wouldn't be any news to them, obviously, but how they see it and how they would see overcoming it, and what we could do to help that.
Yeah, that's a great point, and that's something that, as I've been working with the city, we were kind of figuring out like, oh, what type of incentives could we offer? And one of the ones we came up with was actually making permitting times faster for these types of buildings.
Yes.
We still would need to go to like the planning department and see if that would even be a possibility. It's still very in the beginning stages, as we've just presented the first group of people from the city on Monday. So not exactly sure where that would go, but it's definitely something that is in the works, and you'll hear more about it if it were to continue to that point.
I think your connection with a city council member is very interesting, because if I could create an incentive, it would be a bonus for the building and safety guys that actually get projects approved, as opposed to their more traditional approaches, find the problems and stop the project. So anyway, I think you've put together an interesting combination of potential allies on this. So good for you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, for actually giving us some interesting policy thoughts on incentives and how within the government we measure progress. John.
Good job, Mia. I'd like to dig into a little bit more of the building mass timber in earthquake country. I heard that the Chinatown project, the city of LA, layered lots of extra effort and money and connections, metal connections and reinforcement and stuff that mass timber buildings wouldn't otherwise have. Are those rules clear? What are the cost impact? Does it still work with those? Is our building safety departments ready for this? Just a little, flesh that out a bit more, please.
Yeah, so I'm honestly not super familiar with all the details and all the codes and everything like that. This was just sort of initial research that was put into it. There's definitely way more that needs to go into it to make it a final product. So just from papers I've read, I haven't looked specifically at this area. It's just since there aren't many buildings that have been built in this area, so I'm not super specific on earthquakes in the area and what that would entail, but it's definitely something that I would need to dig into further.
And then that tends to slow things down in terms of change, because especially if the code isn't clear on how you reinforce a building for earthquakes, if it's mass timber, what are the differences? Building officials tend to be very conservative, so they're likely to do whatever they think is needed, whether or not it's needed. It's sometimes. So it can be a real slog to get them done, especially if you're going to do something like a high rise. With the 2-story idea seems like a good place to start.
One thing I learned from Mia and her work is she reminded us that actually wood construction has been around for a long time. And
but this is wood a lot of times is mass timber is structurally different than a regular wood wall.
Yes. Well, this did spin off some other policy discussion options. And one is that it appears that there are a number of buildings being built with huge amounts of wood. I don't know, structural or otherwise, but I've heard this from a developer. There are projects like this going up in Santa Monica, and we do not have locally any kind of policy or ordinance requiring FSC certified lumber or anything like that. And I think the reason is that they want to make it possible to build cheaply with wood. But that's a spin-off that we might want to think about investigating. Just a lumber, some kind of wood certification. Yeah. Anybody else? Additional questions?
If you're going to do that, Lorraine, we really need to understand the cost side, because that can, what is our priority? There are always trade-offs.
Right, exactly. And I'm sure people have thought about that. We can ask questions of Mario at this time as well. An hour has passed, so we can also wrap up. But I did want to mention that Barbara did put a comment in the chat about a new application from the city to further upgrade, I guess, the Michigan Avenue Greenway, and to address some of the traffic concerns there. So, Barbara, do you want to say more about that?
I just want to say this is like the answer to a dream to improve Michigan as a greenway, which was the original idea when the greenway was first proposed and partly constructed in 2014, but it was never completed because the traffic reduction part hit a nerve with a lot of people in the city who didn't think about the environmental injustice of forcing thousands of Samohi traffic through a small residential area. And now there is more of a feeling that, well, hey, this is a Pico neighborhood. We don't really want this to be done to our neighborhood. So there's more of that kind of thinking now. And so now the city has an opportunity to apply for a grant, which will pay for some quick build changes to Michigan. And quick build means less expensive, like you use bollards instead of, concrete barriers. You just like use as little money as possible to make changes. And it wouldn't cost a lot, for instance, to close Michigan at 11th. That would not be costly at all. It could be done with bollards or planters. And so there will be money to try different solutions to reduce traffic on Michigan. And we're pretty sure we're going to have to close Michigan in one direction or both. at 11th to stop parents from using Michigan to drive their kids to school, which has hurt the neighborhood in a really bad way since 1998 when they put a signal at Lincoln Boulevard. So there's lots of options for parents. They've opened all the entrances now. They've done that starting this school year, that they're opening the other gates at Olympic and 4th Street. And also they're going to look at Lincoln. How can we make it easier to drop off kids on Lincoln Boulevard? And if you've seen the changes made to Wilshire Boulevard in the city, you can see that the city really does wonderful things to control traffic. And, you know, if they can do the same thing on Lincoln that they did on Wilshire Boulevard, and this is just a small part of Lincoln from like the freeway to Pico, that part of Lincoln, it can be made so much better for dropping off. And so we're very hopeful that, you know, pretty soon we'll see some changes on Michigan.
I just want to add a little bit to what Barbara spoke about. The grant that the city is applying for would also fund community outreach, which is a very costly part of developing those sort of projects in the city. And it's an important component of that. But it's really encouraging to see the city taking the initiative to move this forward. So we're very heartened by the application the city's making.
It's great.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that update. With that, I want to thank you all for participating. This video has been recorded and it will be available on our YouTube channel. You can feel free to look at it, share it with other people. And once again, thank you for all of you being part of a wonderful community of people interested in figuring our way forward in this difficult climate moment. So thank you, and a special